Mary Margaret was both pleased and surprised when Cameron arrived home much earlier than expected. She had taken his advice and called Emma Swan to ask her if she'd like to come for dinner, and the casserole was barely out of the oven when the front door opened. Emma set down her wineglass, raising her eyebrows. "Your husband?" Mary Margaret dabbed her lips with a napkin and rose. "It must be," she said. "I'll just see if he'll be joining us." She had barely reached the kitchen door when Cameron opened it. He was smiling. "You're home early," she said, then narrowed her eyes suspiciously at the gleam in his brown eyes. "What have you been up to?" "Just took a stroll," he said, stepping into the kitchen. "It's quite refreshing to take in the evening air once in a while." He nodded a greeting to the woman sitting at the table. "Miss Swan, I hope you're well." "Not bad, thanks," she said, tipping her glass. Mary Margaret helped her husband out of his jacket and nudged him towards the table. "Sit down. I'll get you a plate." She smiled when he paused by the cabinet to fetch himself a placemat and cutlery. She had no doubt Emma was sizing him up. There was something hearty about Emma Swan that she envied. The woman practically exuded capability. They had discussed her previous career, which sounded like it amounted to being a bounty hunter. Mary Margaret had been struck by the thought that it must be a very lonely existence, but Emma just shrugged, saying she had always been alone. That, to Mary Margaret, sounded terrible. "I've been hearing stories about your exploits since your arrival," Cameron said, pouring himself a glass of wine. "It sounds like you've made quite an impression." Emma snorted. "On the sign, for sure," she said. "I say don't believe everything you read." "If I may speak freely," Cameron replied, looking up with a brief smile for Mary Margaret as she set a plate down in front of him. "I wouldn't believe anything that appears in the mirror. It tends to be prone to bias." Emma was leaning back in her chair, studying him. "A writer monkey, then? Don't have to ask who the organ grinder is." Mary Margaret shook her head fondly as Cameron raised a glass in salute. "Cameron has never been an admirer of the mayor," she said. He laughed quietly. "What can I say?" he said, taking a sip of his wine. "I have something against people who feel that a town should be their own personal playground. No one should have that much power over people." "Unlike you," Emma said, one arm propped on the back of her chair. "Emma!" Mary Margaret felt her cheeks flush. It wasn't that she was appalled that the woman would say such a thing, but more than everyone in town knew it was true. The speed at which Emma had picked up on local whispers was a little disconcerting. "Touché?" Cameron said. He was actually smiling. "I expect a young lady in red and her grandmother have been telling tales." "Just a little," Emma said. "You own the town?" Mary Margaret's cheeks were burning. "I think that's a bit of an exaggeration," she said self-consciously. "He owns a lot of property, so most people pay rent to him, and sometimes he provides a little extra help when they need it." "Now, dear," Cameron said gently, reaching across the table to pat her hand, "don't let's pretend that I'm some kind of saintly philanthropist." He picked up and buttered a slice of bread, then looked at Emma. "Some of the stories are true. Some are less so. People need help and come to me. I will help them, but there's always a price. In this day and age, a man can't afford to be charitable." "The way they talked," Emma said, picking up her fork again, "it's as if you were the boogeyman or something." Cameron's fork stopped halfway to his mouth, and he looked at her, then at Mary Margaret in amusement. "Do you hear that, dear?" he said. "You married the boogeyman." I did wonder why so many people were surprised. Mary Margaret made a face at him. "They just don't know you," she said, and it was the same argument she had used to defend him more times than she cared to count. None of them had picked her up when she was sitting in a heartbroken, drunken heap in the gutter. He had, and had helped her forget what had hurt her to begin with. And anyway, they come to you for help. You don't make them. "Alas," Cameron said, "as soon as they realize the price, they are inclined to forget that I'm not the one who made them make the deal." He lifted his shoulders in a mild shrug. "One of the hazards of providing urgent services." "More fool them," Emma said, between bites of lamb casserole. Always read the fine print or else you're going to get screwed. Cameron raised his glass to each of them. To intelligent people who actually read the fine print, he said, his expression stone-cold serious, but his dark eyes were gleaming with some kind of mischief. Long may I avoid them. Mary Margaret couldn't help notice that both she and Emma snorted at exactly the same time. Thank you.